very much for joining us. We had something like 60 people registered, and I think we have the best audience in this place that will help us to model the messages that we'd like to put together. And from Paris' comments, it's quite clear that we have a very important task in front of us: how to model the message and how to get the European Commission recommendations known to the various governments. And I think you'll hear from the various people I talked to just this morning before this session how important this work is. So I have used some other slides that the other speakers are not using, so not to bore you with the same slides, otherwise we are going to compete for the same numbers. So I have found a few other things. So in the past we have worked on a certain number of research projects which have yielded some very important research results as well as messages. And now it's really time to do what the management guru has mentioned at an earlier stage, that you have to measure things, to start managing them. So Peter Drucker was famous for that sentence that a lot of MBAs are using. So I'll take you through a few slides. I think without Windsurf, obviously Google would not have moved, because that's a very large company. And we have seen within basically June to November, we crossed, or Google crossed, the 1% users. So that should be in the area of 10 to 15 million users, which is quite phenomenal. So it is doubling basically every 6 months. So while the internet in the 90s were doubling every 12 months. So it's a good number to retain. And if I look at the V6 website, we have something like 90 million hits, of which 50% are V6. So when you go to V6 world, you have a large community, which is quite important. So that's a very important message to take with us. If I look at the access, so I have fiber over V6 in Luxembourg, since I could manage to get EPT to deploy V6. So you compare the speed, and you have a speed between V6 and V4 up to 3 times. It depends on the day and so on. So this is not totally 100%. But from the various tests I have done personally and some others at APNIC in Asia, we see that the speed, due to the fact we have 2 separate internets, V4 and V6, so with V6 you have a lot less hops. And you can measure that as well. As a matter of fact, you can do that now. If you go to through the wireless 6 and to the V6 Forum website and click on that internet connection that has been created by Nick.cz Czech Republic, you'll see whether the connection is as fast as before. So some KPIs are quite important. So I have used those from Lars Eggers, who is the current IRTF chair. So taking the top 500 worldwide, we have reached something like 22%, which is phenomenal. But in each country, for the top 500 of each country, we're averaging around 10%, which is quite normal. So I think when you reach 10% of the top 500, you cover almost more than 80% of the traffic in the country. Okay, so that's quite an important key performance indicator. You can see the same thing on the graphs. So this really happened only in the last 2 years. So I guess starting 2010, 2011, we see this thing. The IETF, which is the yellow one, he has taken all of the websites of the people that visit the IETF and see whether they really do what they say. It's like in the previous thing, you see that 15% of the IETF people are using IPv6. Yeah, so these are the people that eat their own dog food. Now, if I compare it to, for instance, DNSSEC, and a lot of people are working on security, it's quite shameful to see that only 1.2% are deploying DNSSEC. While Tim Berners-Lee has said many times that DNS is the weakest point in the web, and we should be very responsible in using it. So DNSSEC should be a very important thing. And the other one is SIP. It's quite important to note that SIP is also not as deployed as it should be. Although it's a magnificent tool to reduce OPEX and CAPEX within the telecom world. So most probably they do that for themselves, and Ed from Canada has told me a story. I'll ask him a question later on during the panel session to give me an answer to this one, because that's quite an important element that can inhibit the deployment of new technologies. This slide is from Cisco. I'm sure Eric is going to reiterate this. But here, I just wanted to show you that in the last 2 years, 14K prefixes have been assigned. And in the same period, let's say 6 months later on, we have also doubling, if not quadrupling, V6 prefixes, either allocated or, let's say, routable, or there is some V6 alive traffic on these prefixes. And then we have the content providers. There is also a magic surge from basically peanuts on Akamai going up to 11 or 100,000 hits within Akamai, and from their numbers, something like 25% of their traffic is already V6, of which 35% is in Europe, which signals that the traffic is happening in places where V6 is happening. It surges quite fast. And then the content, other content networks, so you see that the majority of the content drivers are there, as well as, surprisingly, some cloud-based services, especially those that have created OpenStack, like Rackspace and so on, are already deploying IPv6. So this shows that new technologies are already looking for scaling and for flexibility through V6. And we have with us here from Deutsche Telekom, Axel, who is a board member of, as well, the ONF. He will tell us what can be done as well in this area, how to reduce CAPEX and OPEX through things like OpenFlow or software designed networking. In terms of European-based IXs, so the big ones are the Amsterdam one and the German one. And you see there, basically, just in the last 6 months, we have more than doubled the traffic. It is still small, but it is doubling, which means that we are now getting into the doubling scale. Okay, so I will tell you later on what needs to be done in order to quadruple this thing, and this is going to happen when some of the bottlenecks are going to be reduced. So in terms of members of all the registries, they have something like a total of 20,000, of which half of them do already have V6 prefixes. It's only a question of igniting them and putting V6 service to the end users. Now, getting to some of the details, so people that don't know that Germany is practically #1 in terms of DNS V6 enablements. So if you look at the Quad A, so almost half of the V6, or half of the V6 enabled websites or DNS is in Germany, compared to the total of 4.2 million, as only 2.6% of the entire DNS is enabled V6. So this is a big contradiction, which tells you that if you do the work, it happens. And here we have an example how this can be achieved. One thing which is quite important, and this is where leadership is fundamental. If you look at the April 2012 top 1,000 domains, you won't even find Google on it. And basically, a year later, it's almost Google in every country. So if you check on the list again, some people have recognized that Google is taking over the internet because that's what they want to do. You will see AT&T and so on starting to search. And so these are fundamental key indicators that some stuff is happening and nobody is talking about it. In terms of who is running the show, Windows is 80%. So it was fundamental work that we have done in the past to get v6 done on Windows. And on the browsers, it's a good mix, but you know, quite clearly, a lot of people are underestimating Internet Explorer. It is still the driving force, although it's nicely shared between Safari and Firefox. But Windows plays and Internet Explorer play a fundamental role. And then coming to the governments, since we have G6 project, obviously taking one country is a lot simpler to manage and to run the show. As you know, we don't have something like NIST, or the European Commission plays this role. But there, they have a lot of people who are technical that can do the work as well. So they have been pushing the US departments, in this case ministries, in order to do v6. And it's quite interesting to see that 37% of US government websites are already v6 enabled. That's a dramatic achievement because it's not that simple as you think in the US. The same thing for the industry. So you see where the problems are starting. So just 3.7% from industry are enabling their websites, while the internet is really an industry initiative. So this is an irony that all of a sudden it's no more industry which is taking leadership, it's the governments. Well, in the days of IPv4, at the beginning was funded by the US DoD and the government and so on, and then they stopped doing it for about 6-7 years until Al Gore picked up IP, and then it became an industry/government thing. And we thought industry is going to play a big role in v6, and this is not the case. And if you see below it, universities are even more miserable. They are not doing their work, so they're not producing the brains that are going to do the work in the field. So the first big glitch, and I'm talking only about Europe, apart from tiny little places like Luxembourg and Portugal, I don't see big players doing v6. We have invited two large telco speakers here with us, and I hope they have some good news for us. So this is a real first bottleneck. Because if the big ISPs do it, v6 is by default, boom, you get v6 done. When you connect to the internet, you connect to v6 automatically. So this is the only thing happening, missing in this case. Same thing for the mobile operators, same scenario. Although v6 was exclusively set in IMS back in the 10th of May 2000, and you can blame me for this, for doing it too early, because that scared companies like Vodafone and so on, but now they're coming back to it. You can see that done on LTE in the US through either Verizon or T-Mobile. So it's an irony that T-Mobile is doing v6 in the US, but not in Europe. But that's most probably the innovation happened outside of Germany. Yes?
No worries, I'll recall.
Excellent. So I'm glad I'm challenging you here. You're going to challenge me too. And then the various universities, some are doing that, but not all. And I think here we need to take critical action as the next brains in the next 2 or 3 years are coming out of the universities. They should be IPv6 enabled themselves. So we have too many NAT brains and not v6 brains. And the next glitch is no European vendors. So the biggest discovery for us with v6 is China. From nowhere to having 67 products from some names that were peanuts 10 years ago. Now they are contenders to companies like Cisco. And as a matter of fact, most probably they are rattling across the world with their chains in order to put everything. The US obviously has kept its leadership, but behind the scenes. So they react to projects, but they don't do a proper promotion of the new products the way it has to be done when you introduce new products. Then you do the proper training of the sales force, the deployment force, and the help desk, and so on and so forth. That's not happening. And I think they should also eat their own dog food. The other problem we have is obviously education. We have a program that was based on the work that Jacques has done in the past in the curriculum study, which we have exploited to create a program around it, and it has been adopted by Cisco on a worldwide basis. And as a matter of fact, most of the people on that list are Cisco, CCNA, CCNP, or CCIE. So I think they understood the benefit of getting their own people to move to V6. And we should do the same thing here in Europe as well for non-Cisco vendors. So. And one of the items is we have now stopped talking about IPv4 exhaustion. We are talking about, coping with the new demand. And the new demand is 800 million IPv4 addresses, which one be able to get. And most probably it will not be V6. They will have to find a way of coping with that. So I would expect a lot of ISPs to think about doing CGN instead of doing V6. And most probably will have to tell them that it's not the proper way of doing it, because that investment has a certain dead end, and it's better to do V6 at least at the same time as CGN. So these are some of the glitches. I have done a bit of just testing, and I have done it also with APNIC because they have the right tools. So you can do that as well now that you have V6. So you can use visual route, to do trace route. So here I'm connecting from my PC to Google in the US. So I see that I need about 11 hops instead of 15 hops, which means that I'm almost 25% faster than in IPv4. So you can see that below. One interesting subject that pops up here, which would be a nightmare to people like the FBI and CIA, is that IPv6 addresses are not documented, while IPv4 are documented, so you know who has it and so on, which creates another issue of privacy. So we have, for instance, in Europe, very, very good privacy recommendations, if not laws, but they're infringed by some people, like even the government themselves in Europe, because Sarkozy has introduced that law, which has been adopted by Germany, to keep logs of the last 6 to 12 months of people connected. So they're not asking people to, keep their own logs, because that would be infringing on people's freedom. And also the registries themselves are not hiding this data, so you can access and find out who has DNS and so on and so forth. That data should be normally, protected. Why should we know who? In case there is infringement, then we can ask them, and then we'll be able to find who is the guy who's hacking on me. For instance, somebody was hacking on V6 from website and nearly stopped it from working, so I could find through RIPE the guy somewhere in India. So I called the guy over there. I told him that one student is going after that. I need to do something about it, or I'm going to call the police. And as a matter of fact, he stopped it. But that should not be easy for everyone. We should keep that data to be private. So the issue with V6 is that, and Aaron has also discussed this issue with the FBI, is that there's no way that they can get all the V6 addresses to be documented so that you have exactly the same data at registration that we have on IPv4 than you have with V6. So at least we have a bit of privacy on that side. So which is a new thing. So if I tell you I've connected from there, I'm the only one to know it. Nobody has. So connecting also from Visual Calc, which is V6, to the V6 forum, I could see that I need 5 hops instead of 11 with V4, because with V4 I have to go through a couple of NATs, which basically derails a bit the connection. And the same thing also with documenting the connection and who owns it and so on and so forth. Okay, so there are new opportunities, at the same time new challenges to privacy and security. So in conclusion, Europe is ramping up. I think the European networks are doing V6. They are not announcing yet service. Major content providers are turning on their V6. And the demonstration that V6 works is no more a question, but there are many details that need to be addressed. Thank you.